Hi everyone, Frank DeMore here with the last Chronicles of Planet Earth, where I connect the dots between Bible prophecy and current events. I'm going to get right into the prophecy about Psalm 83 because this is a prophecy that hasn't been fulfilled yet. We're seeing the stepping stones to this prophecy. That's the war between Israel and the bordering nations that surround Israel. Now, last week I warned you about a flotilla of ships that are going to be heading in towards the Gaza Strip. And Israel said that they would board these ships to stop them, to make sure that no arms were going into the Gaza Strip. There was a blockade there by the Israelis, and this is, as they promised, they would board any ship that was coming through there. They wouldn't let anybody go through. And obviously this is causing tensions between the Arabs and Israel. And it's really isolating Israel in the world community because the PLO and these organized flotillas are using these flotillas and the news of these flotillas to show that Israel is hampering aid from getting into the Gaza, and it makes the Israelis look bad when in fact that aid can go into the Gaza Strip, but on land. And Israel does allow goods and products to go through, but the mainstream news press doesn't report on that, and they just want to focus on what is, the headlines of Israel is doing this to these other people. But just as the Israel stated, this news article came out today: Israel's Navy seizes Gaza-bound yacht. And I warned you about this. They were coming, and Israel did in fact stop the French vessel that left Greece. They lied and said that they were going to Egypt. I mentioned this yesterday in my video. But it says the Israeli Navy Tuesday seized the French yacht carrying the pro-Palestinian activists heading for the blockaded Gaza Strip and force it to go to Israel's Ashdod port, a military spokeswoman said. I can confirm that the yacht has been boarded and that everything went smoothly and there were no casualties. And so that is a good an outcome, that there wasn't any violence. But even without the violence, they're using this again as a tool to show Israel is stopping aid to get into what they see these poor people in the Gaza Strip. It says on boarding was necessary because those in the yacht refused to obey instructions to go to Ashdod, the statement said. Hamas condemned the seizure with spokesman Ishmael Rodwin describing it as piracy, a war crime, and a violation of the principles of human rights. Israel's, whose Marines killed 9 Turkish activists when violence erupted as they stormed the Gaza-bound flotilla in the Mediterranean last year, have vowed to stop any new attempt to breach the naval blockade it deemed necessary to prevent arms from reaching Gaza. And that's the primary reason why they're doing this, because they've had a lot of rockets being shot off from the Gaza into the area where the Israelis live, and they wanted to make sure that they stopped and seized any arms and rockets that were going through. It says Palestinians and their supporters considered the Gaza blockade illegal and say it stunts the economic development of the territory, most of whom 1.5 million residents rely on aid to survive. And obviously they can get this aid, but they can get it from passing through the border inspections by the Israelis. They're not stopping this, as I said, the aid from getting through. They're stopping the water because they've been using facilities like this, ships like this, and these underground tunnels to filtrate arms, supplies, bullets, rockets, and whatnot. And Israel has the right to protect themselves. But again, the press is using this as a stunt to isolate Israel. And of course, what's happening here is we see the Zechariah chapter 12 verse 3 being fulfilled, where it said that Israel will be more or less isolated in the last days, and all the nations would come against them. So we're seeing those stones being set down as well. Now here is another article that also talks about Turkey, and this has to do with another prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 38. The headline reads, U.S. scrambling to prevent Israel-Turkey ties from worsening. Now, the reason why I put this up here is because Israel and Turkey used to be really, really good friends just about a year and a half ago, as a matter of fact. And because of the flotilla, the incidents that took place a year ago when Israel boarded the ships, just like this previous article said, the relationship between Israel and Turkey fell apart. It disintegrated, and now they are enemies. And it is worrisome for the United States, and the United States is trying to put this back together, the relationship. But you have to understand, what does God say about Turkey? Well, Turkey, when you look at the Old Testament, where we find Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, which is a war, another war that hasn't been fulfilled, it will be fulfilled after the Psalm 83 war. Turkey is mentioned as one of the nations that will be coming against Israel during that Ezekiel war. They're called Togarmah. And you'll see who exactly they are. They're modern day Turkey and Armenia. Those are the nations. So, what does it say in this article? It says the U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton relayed a message during their visit to Istanbul last week when Turkish President Abdul Gül from President Barack Obama on the crisis in the Turkish-Israel relations. A senior Israeli officer noted that Clinton told the Turkish president that Obama considered the restoration of ties between the two countries very important and would like to see relations between the two U.S. allies return to their previous levels. The Turkish president's reaction was not different from the standard Turkish position on the matter to date. If Israel apologizes for killing the Turkish citizens on the Mav Marina and pays compensation, we will welcome this, Gül said. And that's the ships that they boarded, and they said that they killed these Turkish people last year. That's what they want the apologies and the restorations for. Clinton also raised the issue in talks late last week with her Turkish counterpart. A senior Israeli official noted that the involvement of the Americans in efforts to bring an end to the crisis and relations between Turkey and Israel was very intensive. And then just one more quote that I'd like to give. It says, the Obama administration is very concerned about the tensions between Israel and Turkey continuing and possibly worsening. Well, let me just say this. What does the Bible say? Well, the Bible tells us that Turkey is going to attack Israel. Obviously, the people in the White House don't know their scriptures, because if they did, they would know what the outcome is. Now, there's nothing wrong with working for peace. We know that we should be working for peace. But as people who study the scriptures, we know what the outcome is already going to be, and that is that Turkey will harden their hearts. The relationship between Turkey and Israel will not be established the way it used to be before, and we know this because Turkey is coming down with Russia, Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, and these other countries that are mentioned in the Ezekiel chapter 38 and chapter 39. So we know what countries are coming. We know that the attacks both from the Psalm war and the Ezekiel war, the prophecy scenarios are setting up, and all we have to do is sit down and do what the Lord told us to do. And what was that? He said to keep on the watch. So if you watch news, you will see not only these bordering nations that surround Israel coming against Israel, but eventually you will also see how Russia unites with all of these nations in the Ezekiel war, and they will attack Israel And both of these wars will be won by Israel. This is the word of the Lord. So if you don't believe it, I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm just asking you, here's the evidence, here's the proof, and then just watch the news. Because if you don't believe what the Lord has shown you, then when you actually see it take place in the news, when you're watching the nightly news or wherever you are, then you'll understand. Maybe the light will go off. Yeah, remember when Frank DeMora was talking about that in relation to the Bible. And maybe at that point, you will receive Christ as your Savior.